door burst open with a force that startled me, and there she was, a furious woman with fire in her eyes. Without a word, she stormed into my living room, slammed her phone onto the table, and hit play. The video showed my wife in a moment of betrayal, her laughter and intimacy with another man cutting through the silence like a blade. "We need to teach them a lesson," the woman said, her voice cold and steady. I stared at her, trying to process the storm that had just descended into my life. But before we dive deeper into this explosive story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you're hooked already, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another gripping tale. It was a quiet Sunday morning, the kind that usually brought peace to Clint's suburban home. Standing on the porch, Clint watched as his wife Chastity loaded the last of her suitcases into the trunk of a sleek black car. At 44, Chastity was a striking woman with sharp emerald eyes and hair as dark as midnight, a testament to years of confidence and discipline. Clint, her husband of 25 years, stood silently, his presence steady, but heavy with unspoken emotion. Their 18-year-old daughter Julie stood by his side, her eyes sharp and protective, as if guarding her father from what was to come. The driver of the car was Michael, Chastity's boss, a younger, self-assured man whose smug grin spoke volumes. Watching from a distance was Louise, Michael's wife, who had recently confided in Clint about her suspicions. The air was thick with unspoken tension, hinting at conflicts yet to unfold. The crisp morning air carried the scent of damp earth and freshly brewed coffee, yet the atmosphere felt anything but serene. On the surface, it seemed like an ordinary morning, a wife preparing for a business trip, a family singing her off. But the scene simmered with underlying tension. Chastity moved with purpose, her every motion betraying a sense of excitement that felt out of place. Julie stood close to Clint, her protective stance deliberate. She was too perceptive to overlook the subtle cracks in her family's foundation. Her presence was a silent reminder to Clint to stay composed, even as Michael's confident demeanor fanned the flames of his growing frustration. Michael, tall and imposing, exuded an air of triumph. His every glance seemed to say, "I've already won." His interactions with Chastity were casual yet too familiar, their dynamic hinting at a deeper connection. Clint's clenched fists and stoic silence revealed his inner turmoil, while Julie's watchful gaze suggested she was ready to act if her father's anger boiled over. The scene was a study in restraint. Beneath the polite smiles and subdued farewells, an emotional storm brewed, foreshadowing a conflict that would soon break the fragile calm of their lives. The relationships between the characters were a tangled web of loyalty, betrayal, and unspoken truths. Clint and Chastity's marriage, built over decades, had once been a source of pride, but now it felt strained under the weight of unspoken grievances. Clint's quiet stoicism masked a deep well of hurt, while Chastity's polished exterior concealed secrets that had driven an invisible wedge between them. Julie, their youngest child, was fiercely loyal to her father. She had an uncanny ability to read the room, often acting as Clint's emotional anchor. Her sharp intuition gave her an understanding of the situation that her father hadn't fully vocalized, making her a silent ally in a battle yet to be fought. Michael, the outsider, was both a disruptor and a catalyst. His interactions with Chastity carried an undeniable familiarity, raising questions about their professional relationship. Louise, Michael's wife, was the unassuming foil to his confidence. She had reached out to Clint, offering truths he hadn't wanted to hear but couldn't ignore. Together, their interactions painted a picture of a family on the brink of destruction, one where alliances were shifting and the boundaries of loyalty were being tested, setting the stage for a story filled with heartbreak and resilience. It was the magical drawstrings of the power of community that pulled the family together and made it stronger. Clint had always prided himself on his ability to provide for his family, but recently his efforts felt unappreciated. Chastity, once his partner in every sense of the word, seemed distant, her priorities shifting toward her career and her new role as an associate partner at her law firm. The woman who used to share his dreams now spoke a different language, one of court cases and high-profile negotiations. Their once vivid conversations had dwindled into transactional exchanges, devoid of warmth. On the porch that morning, Clint couldn't help but notice how easily Chastity deferred to Michael. Her laughter was uncharacteristically light, her body language open in a way it hadn't been with him for years. When Clint had offered to drive her to the airport, she had brushed him off, insisting that Michael's car was already parked at the airport and it was more convenient this way. The rejection stung, more for its casual dismissal than its practicality. Julie, watching the interaction, caught Clint's expression, a fleeting look of hurt that he quickly masked with his usual stoicism. "Dad, don't," Julie whispered, stepping closer to him as if to shield him from the emotional blow. Clint's response was a faint nod, but his clenched fists betrayed his inner struggle. Clint's mind wandered back to their early years. They had married young, building their lives together from scratch. He had worked multiple jobs to support Chastity through law school, sacrificing his own ambitions for hers. Even after 3 children, Chastity had maintained her elegance and drive, but somewhere along the way, their shared goals had diverged. Clint had stayed rooted in their family, while Chastity had soared into a world that seemed increasingly detached from him. Louise's phone call 2 weeks earlier had planted the seed of doubt that now consumed Clint's thoughts. Louise had spoken with a quiet conviction, detailing Michael's pattern of affairs and warning that Chastity was likely another name on his list. At first, Clint hadn't wanted to believe it, but as he watched Chastity and Michael together now, Louise's words felt undeniable. "Dad," Julie said softly, her voice pulling him back to the present, "let her go. She's made her choice." Clint didn't respond immediately, but the weight of Julie's words settled over him. Chastity's betrayal wasn't just about infidelity. It was a rejection of the life they had built together. Clint felt a mix of anger and resignation, knowing that confronting her now would solve nothing. As the car pulled away, Julie took Clint's hand in hers. "We'll be okay," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil around them. Clint squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her unwavering support. Together they stood on the porch, watching the beginning of an ending neither of them could prevent. The sound of the car trunk slamming shut broke the heavy silence on the porch. Chastity, her smile faint but determined, turned to face Clint and Julie. "I'll call when I land," she said, her tone brisk, devoid of warmth. Michael stood by the driver's door, a smug grin on his face as he adjusted his tie. The sight of him made Clint's fists clench involuntarily. He wanted to march down the steps, confront the man, and demand answers. Clint took a step forward, but Julie, sensing his intent, quickly stepped in front of him. "Dad," she said firmly, her voice low but commanding, "don't. It's not worth it." Her gaze met his, steady and mature beyond her years. Clint hesitated, torn between the urge to protect his pride and the wisdom in his daughter's restraint. "She's made her choice," Julie continued, her voice softening. "Let her go." Chastity, oblivious to the tension behind her, waved a casual goodbye and slid into the passenger seat. Michael offered a mockingly polite nod before driving away, leaving a trail of quiet devastation in his wake. Julie's hand lingered on Clint's arm, grounding him as he stared at the empty street. As the car disappeared down the road, Clint felt the weight of 25 years pressing down on him. The early years of their marriage flashed before his eyes, moments of joy and struggle, love and sacrifice. They had built a life together from the ground up, navigating the challenges of young parenthood and financial strain with a shared sense of purpose. Chastity had been his partner, his confidant, and the center of his world. But somewhere along the way, that partnership had shifted. Clint couldn't pinpoint the exact moment. Things began to unravel, but the signs had been there. Subtle at first, then glaring. The long hours Chastity spent at work, the distant tone in her voice when she spoke to him, the way her laughter came so easily with Michael but felt forced at home. It was as if the woman he had loved had become a stranger, someone he no longer recognized. He had ignored the warning signs for too long, convincing himself that her growing independence was simply a natural evolution of their relationship. After all, hadn't he encouraged her to pursue her dreams? Hadn't he worked tirelessly to support her through law school while juggling his own responsibilities? He had been proud of her accomplishments, proud of the life they had built together. But now that pride felt hollow, overshadowed by the ache of betrayal. Julie's words echoed in his mind. "She's made her choice. Let her go." How had they reached this point? Clint felt a mixture of anger and sorrow. anger at Chastity for abandoning the life they had built together, and sorrow for the love that had been lost. He had always believed in the sanctity of their vows, but it was clear now that Chastity no longer shared that belief. Sitting on the porch, Clint allowed himself a moment of vulnerability. Julie, perceptive as ever, didn't press him with questions. Instead, she sat quietly beside him, offering her presence as a source of comfort. Clint was grateful for her strength, even as he struggled to find his own. The phone call had come late one evening, catching Clint off guard. Louise's voice on the other end was steady, but there was an urgency to her words. "I need to tell you something," she began. "It's about Michael and Chastity." Clint had listened in silence as Louise recounted her suspicions. She described Michael's pattern of behavior, his history of affairs with younger women at the firm, his charm, and his calculated manipulation. "St. Louis is just the first stop," Louise had said. "They're planning to spend the weekend in New York, but it's not just for work." Her words were like pieces of a puzzle falling into place. Clint's mind raced, connecting dots he had ignored for too long. The unexplained late nights, the carefully worded justifications, the way Chastity had dismissed his concerns with a wave of her hand. Louise's account was the confirmation he hadn't wanted but couldn't deny. "Why are you telling me this?" Clint had asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Because you deserve to know the truth," Louise had replied, "and because I can't let him do this to another family." In the days that followed, Clint's suspicion grew. He began noticing details he had overlooked before. The way Chastity's phone seemed to light up with messages she never shared, the guarded tone she used when discussing work trips, the absence of guilt or hesitation in her demeanor. Louise provided additional evidence, even a recording of Michael boasting about his new conquest. Each piece of evidence was a nail in the coffin of Clint's faith in his marriage. One evening, as Clint and Julie sat in the living room, the weight of the situation pressed down on them. Julie broke the silence, her voice tentative, but steady. "Dad," she began, "do you think Mom has any idea what we know about her plans?" Clint sighed, running a hand through his hair. "She's always chosen to see the world through rose-colored glasses," he replied. "Even with her sharp legal mind, she ignores the warning signs. If she's heard rumors about Michael, she's dismissed them as idle gossip." Julie nodded thoughtfully. "But we're not blind," she said firmly. "We see what's happening. Doesn't she realize how much this will hurt us?" As President of the United States, President Biden entered the presidential race, opposed, making the unprecedented attempt. Clint looked at his daughter, his heart heavy with both pride and sadness. "She's not thinking about us," he said quietly. "For her, this is about escaping the monotony of our lives. She doesn't see the damage she's causing, or maybe she doesn't want to." Julie's eyes filled with unshed tears, but her voice remained strong. "Then we have to face it together," she said, "because we're stronger than this." Her words gave Clint a glimmer of hope, even as the storm loomed on the horizon. Together, they braced for the battle ahead. The days following Chastity's departure were a whirlwind for Clint. Louise had been a godsend, providing him with detailed information about Michael's past affairs and a clear plan to expose the truth. "You deserve to know everything," Louise had said during one of their late-night phone calls. "This isn't the first time he's done this, and it won't be the last unless we stop him." Armed with Louise's intel, Clint began piecing together the puzzle. Emails from Michael's personal account, forwarded anonymously by Louise, painted a damning picture. The tone of his messages to Chastity was far too intimate for a purely professional relationship. Hotel reservations, billed under an alias but tied to Michael's corporate card, confirmed their shared accommodations. Louise even managed to secure a recording of Michael bragging to a colleague about his business trip. Clint wrestled with a mix of emotions as the evidence mounted. The truth was undeniable. Chastity wasn't just having an affair. She was fully invested in it. Each new revelation felt like a fresh wound, but Clint knew he needed to remain composed for his children's sake. Julie, his unwavering ally, sensed the toll it was taking on him. One afternoon, as they sifted through the evidence together, Julie placed a reassuring hand on her father's shoulder. "We'll get through this, Dad," she said firmly. "But we need to be smart about it. Mom thinks she's in control, but she's underestimated us." Louise and Clint worked discreetly, hiring a private investigator to track Chastity and Michael's movements in New York. The investigator provided photographic evidence of the couple dining together, holding hands, and entering a hotel room. The final piece of the puzzle came when Louise arranged for Chastity and Michael to be served with legal papers mid-trip, capturing the moment on video. When the video arrived, Clint watched it in silence, his face stoic. Julie sat beside him, her jaw clenched. She knew exactly what she was doing, Julie said bitterly. She's not sorry. She's cruel. The revelation sent shockwaves through the family. Clint knew he couldn't shield his children from the truth forever, and the time had come to address it head-on. He called a family meeting, inviting Jason and Justin over to their grandparents' house. Julie, ever the mediator, sat beside her father, ready to confront her brothers if necessary. Jason and Justin arrived with a mix of confusion and concern. "What's going on, Dad?" Jason asked, glancing between Clint and Julie. "Julie," Clint took a deep breath. "There's something you need to know about your mother," he began. "She's been having an affair with her boss, Michael." The room fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Jason's face darkened with anger, while Justin looked incredulous. "Are you serious?" Justin asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Julie jumped in, her tone sharp. "Yes, it's true. We've seen the evidence. She didn't just betray Dad. She betrayed all of us." Jason ran a hand through his hair, pacing the room. How could she do this? After everything Dad's done for her? For us? "It gets worse," Julie said, her voice steady but cold. "This isn't the first time." Justin froze. "What do you mean?" Julie exchanged a glance with Clint, who nodded for her to continue. "Before I was born, Mom had an affair with Uncle Charles," Julie revealed, her words cutting through the air like a knife. Jason and Justin stared at her, their expressions shifting from shock to disbelief. "No way," Jason muttered. "You're saying Uncle Charles? Mom?" "Yes," Clint confirmed. "It ended when she found out she was pregnant with Julie. I stayed because I wanted to keep the family together." Justin sat heavily on the couch, his head in his hands. "How are we supposed to process this? She's our mom." I heard her cry. I was 15 years old. His mother and his little brother barely remembered him, but they recognized a face similar to the one they saw at the crime scene. "Which is also the person who tore this family apart," Julie retorted. "You can't excuse what she's done." Jason looked at Clint, his voice thick with emotion. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" "Because I didn't want to burden you with it," Clint said quietly. "I thought we could move past it, but now it's clear that she hasn't changed." As the weight of Julie's revelation settled over the room, Jason and Justin grappled with the implications. Julie, however, seemed determined to make her point clear. "This isn't just about what Mom did," she said, her voice trembling with restrained anger. "It's about who she is. She's always been selfish, always put herself first." "Julie," Clint interjected gently, "she's still your mother." Julie turned to him, her eyes blazing. "She stopped being a mother the moment she chose her own happiness over this family. I've seen how much she's hurt you, Dad. I'm not going to pretend like it's okay." Jason, still processing the news, finally spoke. "I always thought Uncle Charles stopped coming around because of you, Dad. But it was because of Mom, wasn't it?" Clint nodded. "After I found out about the affair, I cut ties with him. It was the only way I could move forward." Justin, who had remained quiet, suddenly stood. "So, what do we do now? Do we confront her?" "No," Clint said firmly. "This isn't about revenge. It's about protecting ourselves and moving on." Julie added, her tone softening slightly. "We need to focus on supporting each other. Mom's actions don't define us." The room fell into a reflective silence as the siblings absorbed the painful truth. In that moment, Clint realized that while his family might be fractured, they were far from broken. Together, they would navigate the storm, emerging stronger on the other side. As the family conversation ended, Clint felt a renewed sense of purpose. The betrayal had been laid bare, and while the scars would take time to heal, there was a sense of unity among the children. Clint knew the next step would be to finalize his divorce from Chastity and begin rebuilding his life, this time with clarity and strength. The moment of reckoning arrived on a chilly Monday morning in New York. Chastity and Michael, having spent the previous evening celebrating their supposed victory in securing a major legal deal, were unaware of the storm about to engulf them. The knock on their hotel room door was sharp and unrelenting. Michael groggily opened it, assuming it was room service, only to be met by two private investigators and a uniformed process server. "Michael Trusk and Chastity Walker?" the server asked, his tone professional but firm. Michael stiffened, confusion and irritation flickering across his face. Chastity appeared behind him, a robe loosely draped around her shoulders, her expression quickly shifting from curiosity to panic. "You've been served," the process server continued, handing over the legal papers with a practiced efficiency. "These are for the civil suits filed against both of you." As the reality of the situation dawned on them, Chastity's face went pale. Michael, trying to recover, attempted to wave it off. "This is absurd," he muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. The investigators, armed with hidden cameras, captured the entire exchange. The startled expressions, the denial, and the tension that hung thick in the room. The video arrived in Clint's inbox later that evening. He hesitated before pressing play, unsure if he could handle watching the evidence of Chastity's betrayal unfold. But Julie, sitting beside him, placed a steadying hand on his arm. "We need to see this," she said firmly. The footage was damning. It showed Chastity and Michael caught off guard, their reactions oscillating between disbelief and panic. Chastity's voice wavered as she tried to explain, "This is just a misunderstanding," while Michael stood silently, his jaw tight, as if already calculating his next move. Julie's face hardened as she watched. "She doesn't even look sorry," she said, her voice laced with bitterness. "She looks annoyed, like she's upset that she got caught, not that she hurt us." Clint remained silent, his eyes fixed on the screen. The woman he had spent 25 years of his life with, the mother of his children, stood exposed. Not just in her infidelity, but in her complete lack of remorse. It was a devastating confirmation of what he had feared, but had hoped wasn't true. The video quickly circulated among the family. Julie forwarded it to her older brothers Jason and Justin, who were stunned into silence when they saw it. Jason was the first to call Clint, his voice shaking with anger. "Dad, how could she do this? How could she destroy everything we built as a family?" Justin, always the quieter of the two, sent a short text. "I'm sorry, Dad, you didn't deserve this." It was a simple message, but it carried the weight of his heartbreak. Even Clint's estranged brother Charles learned of the video through Julie, who had taken it upon herself to inform him. Charles, who had long harbored guilt over his past actions, called Clint immediately. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. This is worse than I imagined." Clint, though still reeling, found a grim sense of clarity in the chaos. "It's not about what she's done anymore," he told Charles. "It's about what I need to do next." As the news spread, Clint braced himself for Chastity's inevitable attempts to regain control of the narrative. True to form, she called him within hours of being served, her tone defensive and indignant. "Clint," she began, "I can explain. This isn't what it looks like." But Clint had heard enough. "Don't bother, Chastity," he interrupted, his voice calm but resolute. "There's nothing you can say that will change what I've seen. This is over." Julie, standing nearby, watched her father with a mixture of pride and sadness. For the first time, she saw him prioritizing his own well-being over preserving a facade of unity for their family. The exposure of the affair marked a turning point, not just for Clint, but for the entire family. The truth was out in the open, and there was no going back. While the pain of betrayal lingered, so too did a sense of liberation. For Clint, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one where he could rebuild his life free from the weight of deceit. As Julie helped Clint file away the legal documents that evening, she spoke with quiet determination. "We're going to be okay, Dad. We're stronger than this." Clint nodded, a small but genuine smile breaking through his exhaustion. "Yes," he agreed. "We will be." The storm that had threatened to tear them apart had instead brought them closer together, forging a bond of resilience that no betrayal could break. The knock on the door came late in the evening. Clint, seated at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, knew who it was without needing to look. Julie, standing at the counter, glanced at her father, her expression wary. "Do you want me to stay?" she asked quietly. "No," Clint replied, his voice steady. "This is something I need to handle alone." Julie nodded, leaving the room without a word. Clint stood and walked to the door, opening it to find Chastity on the porch. She looked different. Tired, worn, and visibly shaken. Her once pristine confidence had been replaced by a fragile hesitance, but Clint's expression remained unreadable. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Clint stepped aside, allowing her to enter. She lingered by the doorway, as if the weight of her actions prevented her from moving further into the home they had once shared. I need to talk to you," she began, her hands twisting nervously. "About everything." As she sat down at the table, Clint remained standing, arms crossed. The distance between them was palpable. "Clint," she started, her voice cracking, "I know I've hurt you. I know I've hurt the kids. But I wasn't thinking. I got caught up in something. Something I couldn't control." Her eyes searched his face for any sign of softness, but Clint's expression remained impassive. "You got caught up," he repeated, his tone even. "Chastity, this wasn't a mistake. It was a choice, a deliberate, calculated choice, and you made it over and over again." She flinched at his words, but pressed on. "I know I've destroyed so much, but I want to fix it. I want to try. For us. For the kids." Clint let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "Fix it? How do you expect to fix this? You didn't just break our marriage, you shattered every ounce of trust we had. This isn't a cracked vase you can glue back together, Chastity. This is rubble." For a moment, silence filled the room. Chastity's eyes brimmed with tears, but Clint remained unmoved. "I forgave you once," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "When you cheated with Charles, I swallowed my pride for the sake of our family. I thought we could rebuild, but I was wrong. You didn't change. You didn't learn. And now, this time, forgiveness isn't on the table." His words hit her like a blow. "Clint," she pleaded, "please. I know I made mistakes, but we can get through this. We have to." "No, we don't," he said, cutting her off. "The kids and I will move forward, but you won't be part of it. You've made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences." Chastity broke down, her sobs filling the room. Clint watched her for a moment, his heart heavy but resolute. "You're not the person I thought you were," he said softly. "And I can't keep pretending you are." He stepped toward the door, opening it. "It's time for you to go." Chastity hesitated, but the finality in Clint's voice left no room for argument. She rose slowly and walked out into the night. As the door closed behind her, Clint let out a long breath. This chapter of his life was over, and though the road ahead would be difficult, he felt a flicker of hope for the first time in years. Upstairs, Julie waited, ready to support her father as they began to rebuild their lives together. The day Clint and Chastity finalized their divorce was overcast, a fitting backdrop for the somber occasion. Both arrived separately at the courthouse, avoiding eye contact as they walked through the cold, echoing hallways. Julie had offered to come for moral support, but Clint had declined. "This is something I need to close on my own," he had said. In the negotiation room, their lawyers facilitated the discussion. The property division was straightforward. Clint would receive half of their joint savings and sell his share of the house to Chastity, ensuring their youngest daughter Julie could stay there until she graduated. The terms were clear, but the emotional weight of the conversation lingered in the air. Chastity, for the first time, appeared subdued, her confidence dulled by the reality of what she had lost. "I never wanted it to end like this," Chastity said, her voice breaking during a brief recess. Clint looked at her, his gaze steady but distant. "Neither did I," he replied. "But you made your choices, Chastity. Now, we both have to live with them." "So it's true then?" "That's true." Elsewhere, Louise was facing her own legal battle with Michael, albeit with a different energy. While Clint's approach was quiet and deliberate, Louise fought fiercely for her children. With the help of her lawyer and the overwhelming evidence of Michael's infidelity, she secured primary custody of their daughters, Livia and Lori. Michael, reluctant to fight after the scandal tarnished his reputation, agreed to pay substantial child support and share the costs of their education. When Louise left the courthouse, she felt a surge of relief. It wasn't just about winning custody. It was about protecting her daughters from the instability Michael had brought into their lives. That evening, she sat down with Clint to share the news. "It's done," she said, her voice a mix of exhaustion and triumph. "The girls are safe, and I can finally start rebuilding." Clint nodded, offering her a rare smile. "We're both starting over," he said, "and maybe for the first time in a long time, we can do it right." As Clint and Louise shared their respective victories, there was a sense of quiet determination between them. The divorces were a painful end to a chapter neither had expected, but they also marked the beginning of something new, a chance to rebuild, not just for themselves, but for their children. The storm had passed, and though the path ahead was uncertain, they were ready to face it together. In the weeks following the divorce, Clint and Louise found solace in each other's company. Their shared experiences of betrayal forged a bond that felt natural and unforced. What began as friendship gradually deepened into something more. Clint found himself drawn to Louise's warmth and resilience, while Louise admired Clint's unwavering strength and quiet compassion. Their budding relationship also extended to Louise's daughters, Livia and Lori. Clint, with his steady and thoughtful nature, became a comforting presence in their lives. He joined them for dinners, helped with homework, and even taught Livia how to fix her bike one sunny afternoon. The girls, hesitant at first, began to trust him, their laughter filling the spaces that had once felt empty. One evening, as they gathered around the dinner table, Livia looked at Clint, her expression serious yet hopeful. "When you and Mom get married," she asked, "can we take your last name? We want to be Walkers too." Louise's eyes filled with tears as Clint paused, overwhelmed by the sincerity of the question. He crouched down to Livia's level and said, "If that's what you want, then I'll make sure it happens. You're already part of this family." Later that night, as Clint tucked Lori into bed, she hugged him tightly and whispered, "Thank you, Dad, for loving us enough to keep your word." As he walked out of her room, Clint felt a profound sense of peace. For the first time in years, his future felt whole again. On a crisp Sunday afternoon, Clint stood, surrounded by family at his parents' farmhouse, the smell of home-cooked meals wafting through the air. As laughter echoed across the yard, Clint cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. Louise, standing nearby, looked curious but unsuspecting. "I wanted to thank everyone for their support during the hardest time of my life," Clint began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "But today, I want to talk about a new chapter, one filled with love and hope." He turned to Louise, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small velvet box. Dropping to one knee, he said, "Louise, you've shown me strength, kindness, and what it means to truly rebuild. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Louise's face as she nodded, her voice breaking. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The family erupted in cheers, and the celebration soon shifted into planning their wedding and adoption ceremony. On the day of the event, under a golden autumn sky, Clint and Louise exchanged vows, sealing their love. Minutes later, Livia and Lori stood beside them as the adoption papers were signed, officially uniting them as a family. As the newly blended family stood together for photos, a sense of peace filled the air. The scars of betrayal had not vanished, but they no longer defined their lives. Livia and Lori clung to Clint, calling him Dad with pride and joy. Julie, standing beside her father, smiled knowingly, seeing the happiness he had rediscovered. In the weeks that followed, the family began settling into their new routines, creating a home built on trust and love. Clint and Louise found comfort in the ordinary moments, shared dinners, late-night conversations, and watching their children thrive. Exercise became a way of life throughout. Though the past had been painful, it no longer weighed them down. They had chosen to embrace the future with open hearts, ready for whatever lay ahead. Together, they began this new chapter as a family, leaving behind a legacy of resilience and hope. The story is a testament to the triumph of love and perseverance over betrayal. At its core, it underscores the power of family and the importance of choosing forgiveness, not as an obligation, but as a pathway to healing. Clint's journey is one of rediscovering self-worth, recognizing that letting go of a toxic past is an act of strength, not weakness. Louise's resilience and dedication to her daughters remind us of the sacrifices made to protect those we love. Together, Clint and Louise demonstrate that it is possible to build something beautiful from the ashes of heartbreak. The theme of redemption runs deep, not just for Clint and Louise, but also for their children, who learn to rebuild their trust and embrace a new sense of unity. Ultimately, the story highlights the enduring hope that comes with new beginnings, proving that even after the darkest storms, the sun will rise again.